In 1979, the United States had a national security satellite known as Vela 6911, quietly aging in high orbit above the Earth. Its sole mission was to monitor global compliance with the 1963 Partial Test Ban Treaty. To do this, it carried specialized optical sensors called bang meters, designed specifically to detect the exact light signatures of atmospheric nuclear explosions. This animated graph illustrates the unique double-hump right curve of a nuclear detonation. First, an intense 1 millisecond thermal flash. Then, a high-velocity shockwave hides the fireball, dropping light intensity near zero, before becoming transparent again and releasing a longer, wider secondary pulse. Before September 1979, the Vela system had a flawless record. It had captured exactly 41 of these double-flash signatures. Every single one was corroborated as a real physical nuclear test conducted by global powers. Zero false alarms. Then, on September 22nd, Vela triggered for the 42nd time. Deep over a remote corridor of the sub-Antarctic oceans, the sensors recorded an intense double-flash event, initiating an immediate classified crisis designated as Alert 747. The United States possessed a system with an unbroken, heavily calibrated technological track record. Yet almost immediately, the government claimed its own instruments were wrong. Facing a potential diplomatic catastrophe, the Carter administration quickly assembled an independent group of academic scientists, known as the Ruina Panel. Their specific mandate was to find any plausible, natural explanation for the ocean flash. The panel eventually landed on a highly specific scenario. They concluded that a micrometeoroid collided with the satellite's outer solder panel, dislodging a tiny cloud of debris. As these microscopic particles drifted past the camera lenses, they reflected sunlight, tricking the sensors into registering a false double flash. It was a neat, non-nuclear alibi, but independent physicists at the national laboratories refused to accept it. They bypassed the White House narrative and began auditing the raw physical data themselves. Scientists at the Stanford Research Institute audited the panel's model to test its absolute physical limits. They started with geometric shielding. The satellite's optical sensors were recessed deep inside the hexagonal chassis. Any debris knocked off the outer solar panels would travel on outward trajectories, physically shielded from ever entering the lens's field of view. Then they calculated the velocity constraints. To mimic the rapid 1 millisecond initial nuclear flash, the debris would have to move incredibly fast, close to the lens. But at that high velocity, the particles would scatter instantly, making it impossible to stick around long enough to generate the wide secondary thermal pulse. The Stanford audit proved that for a micrometeoroid strike to perfectly replicate the geometry, speed, and light curve of a nuclear blast, it would require a statistical probability of roughly 1 in 100 billion. The flash was not a sensor error. Beyond the optical data, researchers looked to the environment. When a low-altitude explosion occurs, grazing animals act as highly efficient biological filters, pulling airborne fallout from pasture grass into their bodies. About a month after the flash, sheep slaughtered in Melbourne, Australia, were found to have highly elevated levels of iodine-131 in their thyroid glands. This specific isotope is created exclusively through nuclear fission. Underneath the ocean surface, the deepwater SOAR channel acts as a waveguide for low-frequency sound. Acoustic sensors all the way at Ascension Island recorded massive low-frequency blast waves bouncing off the underwater and Arctic ice shelf directly from the source area. High above the Earth, a massive upward pressure wave from the explosion triggered traveling ionospheric disturbances. The radar at the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico detected this wave of compressed electrons rippling outward from the sub-Antarctic Ocean. Biology in Australia, hydroacoustics in the deep Atlantic, atmospheric pressure waves over Puerto Rico. The alignment of global data definitively proved a low-yield nuclear weapon had detonated. The physics confirmed an explosion, which left an immediate geopolitical problem. Whose weapon was it? In the late 1970s, apartheid-era South Africa and Israel both faced severe regional isolation and intense United Nations arms embargoes. To survive, the two governments formalized a highly classified military partnership known as the ISAPAC. The September 22nd blast was the culmination of this alliance, codenamed Operation Phoenix. Israeli scientists provided the nuclear warhead design and radioactive tritium. while South Africa supplied the raw uranium, the naval security, and the vast unmonitored sub-Antarctic testing grounds. The joint operation successfully secured a tested nuclear deterrent for both isolated nations. But for the United States, that success created a massive diplomatic time bomb. When the flash was first detected, President Jimmy Carter's White House realized they were staring down a legal nightmare. Under American non-proliferation law, if the United States caught an undeclared nation testing a nuclear weapon, the president was legally mandated to immediately cut off all military aid, financial assistance, and arms exports to that country. Applying those mandatory sanctions to Israel was a political impossibility. It would have enraged Arab partners and instantly collapsed the Camp David Accords, the signature foreign policy achievement of the Carter presidency. The administration's greatest diplomatic legacy was suddenly being held hostage by empirical scientific data. To protect the geopolitical balance, the White House initiated a coordinated policy of administrative containment, systematically obscuring the true origins of the ocean flash. The administration deliberately withheld classified intelligence detailing the active Israel-South Africa Defense Pact from their own scientific panel. By removing the suspects, they forced the scientists to look for a non-nuclear conclusion. Inside the government, officials actively suppressed internal dissent. When independent non-proliferation scientists publicly insisted the data pointed to a nuclear test, administration officials threatened to destroy their professional careers. The Vela incident remains officially unresolved by the US government today. It serves as a stark historical record. When the physical truth threatens the survival of global geopolitical alliances, powerful institutions will readily weaponize doubt to rewrite reality.